The world watched Donald Trump publicly attack his NATO allies. It was the defining image of his foreign policy, a wrecking ball aimed at the heart of the West. But what if that chaos wasn't the poison, but the cure? What if the man accused of gutting the alliance was the one who accidentally gave it a spine of steel? Could a strategy of disruption actually create resilience? This is the hidden story of how a political earthquake unintentionally bulletproofed an alliance for a war it never saw coming. For 70 years, the bargain was simple. Europe, nestled safely under America's vast military umbrella, focused on rebuilding and prosperity. After the Soviet Union fell, a peace dividend was declared. Defense budgets across the continent were slashed. Germany, Europe's economic engine, became a military lightweight, content, and comfortable. Then came 2014 and Russia's first invasion of Ukraine. NATO members solemnly pledged to spend 2% of their GDP on defense, a promise most conveniently forgot. The diplomatic nudges from Washington were polite, persistent, and perfectly ignorable. Then the script was ripped to shreds. President Trump arrived and treated the sacred alliance not as a pact of values, but as a protection racket. He didn't nudge, he shoved. He called leaders of allied nations delinquent. He publicly questioned America's commitment to Article 5, the one-for-all, all-for-one promise that was the bedrock of Western security. The consensus was clear. This was a catastrophe, a gift to Vladimir Putin, revealing a West hopelessly divided against itself. But beneath the surface of this chaos, a different truth was taking root. This is the first secret, the breaking of strategic complacency. Decades of quiet American requests for Europe to spend more had achieved almost nothing. In Berlin, in Paris, in Rome, political inertia was a powerful force. Social spending won elections. Military spending did not. Trump's method was a radical departure. It was public, it was humiliating, and it was terrifying. For the first time since the Cold War, European leaders were confronted with the genuine possibility that America might simply leave. The threat was no longer abstract. It was existential. This raw fear did what polite diplomacy never could. It shattered the political consensus that allowed for military neglect. It forced a painful public debate inside Germany about what survival would cost if America was no longer guaranteed to pay the bill. This leads to the second revelation, the unintended catalyst for Germany's awakening. Trump saved his sharpest criticism for Germany. He blasted its low defense spending. He accused it of being a captive of Russia because of its reliance on Russian natural gas through the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The German establishment was deeply insulted, but the accusation contained a core of profound, uncomfortable truth. Germany's entire economic model was built on two pillars: cheap Russian energy and free American security. Trump's attacks signaled that one of those pillars was cracking. A slow, agonizing reappraisal began within the German security apparatus, long before Russian tanks rolled toward Kyiv. The political will to finally meet the 2% spending target wasn't born in 2022. It was conceived in the anxiety of the Trump years. So when Chancellor Olaf Scholz stood before the Bundestag and announced the Zeitenwende, the historic turning point, and a massive 100 billion euros injection into the military, it seemed sudden, but it wasn't. The invasion was the spark, But the gunpowder had been laid, grain by painful grain, for years, and this reveals the final piece of the puzzle, the pivot from dependency to partnership. Trump's transactional worldview horrified alliance traditionalists. "You don't pay, you get no protection" was a brutal reduction of a complex security pact, yet it had a revolutionary effect. It forced European allies to stop thinking of American security as an entitlement and start calculating its actual price. They had to adopt the very transactional logic they despised. What is our sovereignty worth? What is the cost of our own defense? This changed the psychological dynamic of the entire alliance. It nudged Europe away from being a mere dependent and toward becoming a genuine partner, a partner that, while still allied with America, understood it needed the capacity to defend itself. This newfound drive for self-reliance, born of fear and resentment, is what made NATO a more balanced and ultimately tougher organization when the ultimate test arrived. The simple narrative is that Putin's 2022 invasion alone revived a sleepy NATO. But this fails to answer the critical question: why this time was the response so unified and so swift? Because the foundations of complacency had already been cracked. The verdict of history is therefore steeped in irony. The president who seemed to be NATO's greatest antagonist may have administered the shock therapy it needed to survive. His nationalist America First doctrine did not, in the end, break the alliance. It inadvertently kickstarted a process of European self-reliance that proved indispensable. The chaos of his presidency forced a comfortable, bureaucratic system to confront its own fragility just in time. The result was not a weaker NATO, but a tempered one, and it forces us to ask a difficult question for our own turbulent age. Can true strength sometimes emerge from the most unexpected and unwelcome of sources? To continue unraveling the secret calculations behind modern history, subscribe now.